Check out my weird dick!
Well, there's no coming back from that.
Mama, you better back the fuck up!
Robbie Weirdick from high school.
Are you kidding? What?
You're the only one who's ever been nice to me. The only one who's never laughed at me.
Sorry, man. Harris is the... Who is he?
It's my partner.
"20 years ago, back in 1996, Calvin Joyner was the most popular kid in high school. He had everything going for him. He was handsome, smart, athletic, and kind. People called him the Golden Jet. Everyone loved Calvin. During a school assembly, he was giving a motivational speech while getting an award for being the best student.
I, for one, will push myself at every stage, at every step.
But suddenly, something strange and cruel happened. A group of bullies burst into the gym, dragging a naked, overweight student named Robbie. He had been happily dancing alone in the shower when they threw him out to humiliate him in front of the entire school. Everyone laughed loudly. It was one of the most embarrassing moments of Robbie's life. But Calvin didn't laugh. He felt bad for Robbie and did something no one else did. He took off his varsity jacket and gave it to Robbie to cover himself. That small act of kindness meant everything to Robbie. Fast forward 20 years later. Calvin is now an adult. He works as a regular accountant in an office. He's married to his high school sweetheart, Maggie.
I just don't want to go.
Calvin, it's our 20-year high school reunion. I'm not going to go without you.
But deep down, Calvin isn't happy. He feels like he failed in life. In high school, people thought he would become a senator, governor, or someone important. But now he just files tax papers while his coworkers get promoted around him. At dinner one night, Maggie talks about their upcoming high school reunion. But Calvin doesn't want to go. He's embarrassed by his boring life. Maggie is disappointed because she was excited about it, and she starts to feel like he's ashamed of her too. The next day, Calvin gets a strange Facebook friend request from someone named Bob Stone. He doesn't know who it is, but he accepts. A few minutes later, Bob messages him and asks to meet for a drink. Curious, Calvin agrees. When Calvin arrives at the bar, he's shocked to see a huge, muscular man waiting for him. This guy looks like a superhero, but then he realizes something unbelievable. This man is Robbie, the same kid who got humiliated in high school.
From high school.
Are you kidding? What?
Now he's strong, confident, and full of energy. Robbie changed his name to Bob Stone. Calvin can hardly believe his eyes. Bob is super excited to reconnect. They sit down, drink, and catch up on life. Bob says Calvin was his only friend back in high school, the only person who was ever kind to him. That night, Bob asked Calvin to help him with some accounting files. Calvin says yes, not thinking much of it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Come here.
Later, Bob accidentally spills beer on Calvin's laptop and asks to crash at his place for the night. Calvin, being polite, lets him sleep on the couch. The next morning, something strange happens. A woman knocks on Calvin's door and says she's a CIA agent. She shows him a photo of Bob and asks if he's seen him. She tells Calvin that Bob is wanted by the US government for murder and treason. Calvin is stunned. He doesn't know what to think. He says Bob is inside, but when they check, Bob is already gone. Now the CIA is pressuring Calvin. They tell him that Bob listed Calvin as his emergency contact, and since they've been seen together, Calvin is officially part of the investigation. He'll need to help the agency bring Bob in. Calvin doesn't want to get involved, but it's too late. Later, Bob contacts Calvin and says they need to meet. At the office, Calvin tries to warn the CIA, but Bob somehow outsmarts them.
Hey, great job at getting out of here, Jet. That's teamwork.
Wait, what did you just do?
A crazy shootout breaks out. Bob saves Calvin, and the two escape by jumping through a glass window and landing on a giant inflatable gorilla outside.
Wow! You feel that, Jet? That was the balls right there!
It's wild, dangerous, and completely unreal. Once they're safe, Bob finally tells Calvin what's going on. According to Bob, a criminal known as the Black Badger stole secret access codes to a powerful US spy satellite. This satellite can see and listen to anything in the world. If these codes are sold, it could be a huge threat. Bob says he and his old CIA partner Phil were tracking the Black Badger, but during a mission, Phil got trapped in an elevator and died.
And I couldn't save him. No! It was awful, Cal.
Now the CIA thinks Bob is the traitor, but he says he's innocent and still trying to stop the real criminal. Calvin doesn't know who to trust. He wants to go home and forget about everything, but Bob tells him the CIA is probably watching his house. That means his wife could be in danger. Calvin calls Maggie and tells her to meet him at their marriage counselor's office instead. At the session, Bob surprises them by showing up, pretending to be part of the therapy. He joins the counseling games and even plays along.
Stare into my soul, and I'll stare into yours. I'm your wife.
You are not my wife.
It's silly and awkward, and Maggie walks out angry, thinking Calvin isn't taking things seriously. After the session, Bob begs Calvin not to activate the CIA's tracking device. He says he needs Calvin's help decoding the stolen transaction numbers linked to the satellite sale. Calvin decides to help and takes Bob to a finance expert who can read those numbers. But that expert turns out to be Trevor, the same bully who humiliated Robbie in high school. Trevor acts nice, but then makes another mean joke. Calvin expects Bob to fight back, but instead, Bob walks away. He tells Calvin that he never forgot how Calvin was the only person who stood up for him. That meant more than anything. Still feeling guilty, Calvin secretly alerts the CIA. They arrive and arrest Bob.
Sorry, man.
Sorry for what?
But while Bob is locked up, Calvin has second thoughts. He realizes that Bob may actually be telling the truth. So Calvin comes up with a plan. He distracts the agents, steals the keys, and breaks Bob out of the building. Now they're both fugitives, racing against time to stop the sale of the spy codes. Bob explains that the codes they found weren't passwords. They were GPS coordinates. When they check the coordinates, they find out the sale is happening in Boston. So they go to a private airfield, sneak onto a plane, and fly to the meeting point. When they arrive, Calvin notices something strange. The deal is supposed to happen in an underground parking lot. Bob agrees they should split up and search. Inside, Bob sees a group of dangerous men. One of them is the client ready to buy the codes. Then, to Bob's shock, Phil, his old partner, who was supposed to be dead, walks out of the shadows. Phil reveals that he faked his death and is actually the Black Badger. He planned everything and blamed Bob to stay hidden. He wants to sell the codes and become rich. Suddenly, a shootout begins. Bob and Phil fight. Calvin grabs the flash drive with the codes and runs. The client's men chase him, but Bob shows up and saves him just in time. They escape to a nearby bridge. There, Bob and Phil confront each other. Both men beg Calvin to believe them. Calvin is confused and scared. He doesn't know who's lying. In the heat of the moment, Calvin shoots Bob in the shoulder. Phil demands the codes, but Calvin refuses. He tries to shoot Phil, but the gun is empty. Phil laughs and mocks Bob for being too soft and emotional to ever be a real villain. Then, in a clever move, Calvin distracts Phil using a silly trick from high school. Bob takes the chance to tackle Phil and throw him off the bridge. It's finally over. They saved the country and became heroes. A few months later, they show up at their high school reunion in a helicopter. Maggie is there too, and Calvin apologizes for everything. He tells her he's happy with the life they built and that he's proud of who he is. Inside the gym, Bob gets nervous. He doesn't want to face everyone again, but Calvin surprises him. He secretly changed the prom king votes so that Bob would win. As Bob walks to the stage, Trevor tries to bully him again, but this time, Bob knocks him out with one punch and keeps walking. Bob gives an emotional speech. He says that years ago he stood in the same spot, naked and embarrassed, while everyone laughed at him. But today is different. He has friends, confidence, and he's proud of who he's become. Then, in a bold move, he takes off all his clothes again, just like before. But this time, people cheer. They don't laugh. They support him. In the final scene, Calvin says goodbye to Maggie, who is now pregnant. He steps into Bob's truck and Bob hands him a gift, Calvin's old high school jacket. Calvin puts it on and they drive away together. Bob is now working with the CIA and Calvin is joining the team too.
Okay.